But Karl Rove says, and Dana Perino says, and quotes the president as saying, well, we never heard you express any of that stuff while you were here. Dan Abrams made a pretty good point here on his show last night. Whistleblowers or people who are not happy in an environment and see something wrong with it may make an internal attempt to correct things, or maybe they won't. But they don't usually stand there for 10 months batting their heads against the wall saying, I can make this better if I complain enough. What would have happened to you if you had gone to somebody above you and said, we are misleading the American public about, just fill in the blank, Iraq, Valerie Plame, even 9/11, we're misleading to some degree. What would have happened to you and to the government?
Well, it would have been interesting. I don't know, since that didn't happen, but there was not a lot of let me step back, I guess, a little bit, because and go back through some of that period again. Again, I continued to believe in this president as we were going into war in the immediate aftermath and when I took over as White House press secretary. But if you go back and read one of the chapters in the book, I talk about becoming White House press secretary, and I had some qualms. I delayed the announcement because I was concerned about whether or not I could do the job the way I wanted to do it. I was coming in the middle of, or as we were gearing up for an election year, and I knew that no one wanted to change the way things were being done, that they wanted to continue that position to continue basically operating the way it had been operating and not getting too out front of the president, not making a lot of news and so forth. So I did have those qualms, but I made the decision that this was a unique opportunity and made the decision to go forward with it.
One other reaction to this that I'd like to get your reaction to, Congressman Wexler, who suggested that after what you have said here, that you should be testifying to Congress about this administration. Do you agree with him, and would you?
One, I don't know that there's much more benefit to me going before Congress. I haven't really thought about it. I'm glad to share my views, and I share them fully in this book. I'm not sure exactly what he's calling for me to talk about, but everything I know about the leak episode is in this book, so I really haven't spent time thinking about it.
Scott McClellan also writes of, quote, propaganda, how he was used, how as a result you were used, when our interview continues next on Countdown. We rejoin you with former White House Press Secretary Scott McClellan's first primetime interview after the publication of his singular book, What Happened. All right, propaganda, you write of its use in the book, and you write of the supposed liberal media not really doing its job for not being dubious enough, particularly about Iraq. But let me read this. Trying to make the WMD, while the administration was trying to make the WMD threat and the Iraqi connection to terrorism appear just a little more certain, a little less questionable than they were, quietly ignoring or disregarding some of the crucial caveats in the intelligence and minimizing evidence that pointed in the opposite direction, using innuendo and implication to encourage Americans to believe as fact some things that were unclear and possibly false, such as the idea that Saddam had an active nuclear weapons program, and other things that were overplayed or completely wrong, such as implying Saddam might have had an operational relationship with al-Qaeda. I think many in the media, liberal or otherwise, would rant and rave and say, no, this is not possibly true, and then tell you off the record, yeah, we did lay back, possibly for patriotic reasons, possibly for fear. A lot of things were involved. But I'm interested because there's no real mention of this in the book. What about the supposed conservative media, and obviously the symbol of that is Fox News? What was Fox News to you and to the White House? Was it a friendly cousin, a house organ? Was it the choice for funneling propaganda? What was it? Well,
I mean, there's certainly allies there that work at Fox News, and there's one story that I've told before. I didn't include it in the book, but during the Vice President's hunting accident, which was another disillusioning moment for me because I was out there advocating, get this news out and get it out now. And, of course, the Vice President said, no, and decided to send it to the website, or the Corpus Christi Caller-Times website, as opposed to getting it out widely to the national media.
I remember.
And caused me a lot of fun at the podium for about 3 days before the Vice President decided that he was going to go out and talk about this after a little nudging from the President. And we were standing outside the Oval getting ready to go in for a meeting, and he looked at me and he said, you know why I picked Fox News to do this? Because I want everybody else to have to cite Fox News when they do their reports. It's just kind of the attitude of the Vice President about things. We've seen his attitude, that kind of attitude, in other comments he's made when doing interviews as well, such as with Martha Raddatz when she asked him, and he responded with the so.
Yeah. That people don't agree with this policy, and it was
right.
So.
And that was his answer.
Yeah. What did you know, or did you know anything about this story that the New York Times reported last month, that the Pentagon had essentially these quid pro quo deals with retired generals who, while presenting themselves on many of the networks as disinterested observers, in fact, were still perhaps involved in companies that had still had dealings with the Pentagon? It was a very dicey situation journalistically. Did you know about it? Did you know you had a staff of generals working for you in some respect?
That I didn't know. That was pretty much left for the Pentagon to run their way.
This next question I know is going to come across, and I can't resist it, it's going to come across to some degree as self-aggrandizing, but relative to the media, and I'm asking this for every person who ever came up to me on the street and said, I feel like I'm going out of my mind living through this. This cannot be the America that I grew up in. Were the critics in the media and outside the media of the president largely right?
In terms of the Iraq War and the build-up to the war?
Specifically that, and you can go out in any direction you want, but specifically in terms of Iraq.
I think certainly in terms of Iraq, there was a lot that they were right about as I went back and reflected on this. It's not that I'm necessarily aligned with them on some other views and things, but certainly on the build-up to the Iraqi war, we should have been listening some more to what they were saying. The American people should have been listening a little bit closer to some of what was being said. But I, like a lot of Americans, was caught up in the moment of post 9/11 and wanting to put my faith and trust in the White House and the president that I was serving.
Does it cost you, and I ask this question sympathetically, does it cost you sleep when you hear about another casualty in Iraq that you would have had that much to do with that war?
Well, I used to walk, and I talk about this in the book, I used to walk alongside the president when he would visit the fallen, and it has a very profound effect on you. Our troops are doing an amazing job. They've succeeded. I mean, they've done their job,
yes,
and they've done more than they've should have been called on to do in the first place, and they continue to do an amazing job. But I have been there in the room with the president when he's walked in to comfort families of the fallen, or walked into, I remember vividly, and I talk about this in the book as well, when the president walked into a room at Walter Reed, and you had a young mother with the boy, I think, was in the 7-year-old range, and his father is sitting there in a wheelchair with bandages wrapped all around his head, and none of us, you couldn't tell if he knew what was going on around him. And it was just a powerful moment, very moving moment. The president was moved by it, very much so. You know, I could see in his eyes how moved he was by it, and I talk about that in the book. But you don't forget those moments.
But about Iraq, you had written in the book, in the permanent campaign era, it was all about manipulating sources of public opinion to the president's advantage. Was this true about Homeland Security, to your knowledge, to any degree? Because that's been a suspicion, obviously, of a lot of the president's critics. Did the White House manipulate at any point, to any degree, the threats of terror for the president's advantage?
You know, I can't speak to that. That was more in some policymaker realm that, again, in part of the compartmentalized White House. That's not something I explore in the book because I don't have direct knowledge of some of that.
So there's a press conference. It pertains to the White House and a threat to the nation, and they did not clue you in on it.
Well, there were certainly times when I was involved in some of the threats. I remember it was over the holiday period, maybe 2004, when there were threats.
The Christmas time flights threats?
Yeah, the Christmas time flights. And I did sit in on some national security or counterterrorism meetings then, and there was a real concern then. But I can't speak to some of the other meetings that might have occurred.
One more break, then we look ahead with Scott McClellan. The 64,000-person question. The White House did all this for a war in Iraq. Are they now doing all this all over again for a war in Iran? And now we'll conclude Scott McClellan's first primetime interview by looking ahead. All that is in the book, as I've already described it, a kind of a Rosetta Stone for the Bush administration. About Iraq, you wrote, but today, as I look back on the campaign we waged to sell the Iraq war to the American people, a campaign I participated in, though I didn't play a major role in shaping it, I see more clearly the downside of applying modern campaign tactics to matters of grave historical import. Reflecting on that period has helped crystallize my understanding of the permanent campaign with its destructive excesses and how Washington in its current state of partisan warfare functions on mutual deception. The picture isn't pretty. Scott, are they doing that now about Iran?
I certainly hope that that is not the case, but you know, we don't know. I don't know. I mean, I should say it that way. But they're still in this permanent campaign mode. They haven't backed away from that. You know, I can't speak specifically to what the intent is in some of the people's heads there. I think that you know, our options are certainly limited with all our commitments right now